participants, welcome to day 2 of this section. Today we're going to talk about land tenure, resettlement planning and implementation. Land is a very important access all over the world, and it's important we know how land is acquired, and then we look at the issues surrounding resettlement planning and implementations. When on the grounds of development projects, the people will have to be displaced. What are the processes that need to be followed? How do we handle them, the people that are affected? By way of introductions, we are going to look at land tenure systems in Nigeria, the Land Use Act of 1978, the property rights to land and land right, access to land in Nigeria. How do we have access to land in the country Nigeria? At the end of these sections, it is expected that as a participant, you're able to list at least 4 ways by which land is owned and acquired in the country. You're able to list different types of rights to land and then enumerate different ways land is used. This is a learning outcome. You'll be able to list 4 ways by which land is owned and acquired, list different types of rights to land, and enumerate different ways land is used in the country. By way of introduction, when we talk of land tenure, we refer to agreed system of land ownership or acquisition of land, whether by individual or whether by group, as in family, as in community, whether it's government or non-governmental organizations, either for temporary or permanent use. How do you acquire land in your community? How do you acquire land in your family? In most cases in Nigeria, no land acquisition is by inheritance, transfer from one generation to another. But you know that every land in a local government is subject to the control of the local government chairman. Also, is the state governor in every state that also has the rights to allocate land and is the custodians of land. It is one to understand land tenure in Nigeria for a sound resettlement intervention for project affected persons, in communities. The way land is acquired in Nigeria is important because the people have to reset it to another area. You can't take somebody to somebody's land. There will be issues. We know all over the world today, there will be a lot of issues, challenges, fight as a result of land. Tenure is legally and socially recognized right, and obligations established in the terms on which land may be held and used, with defining in official laws and regulations, or in many cases by custom. It may be official or statutory tenure, or it may be by customary tenure. What are the categories of ownership of land in Nigeria? Look of land tenure systems. Number 1, it might be the private ownership, it might be communal ownership, it might be state, it might be non or open access. These are ways of having access to land. The Land Use Act. Have you ever wondered? At times when I look at this, I always ask myself questions. The Land Use Act was promulgated in 1978 when Obasanjo was the military head of state. But do you know that all decrees, we have some decrees that were promulgated then and then abrogated. But from 1978 till now, nothing has been done about this Land Use Act. That is to tell you the extent, the intricacies, and the issues surrounding land that it cannot be tampered with anyhow. The then Federal Military Government of Nigeria promulgated the Land Use Act on the 29th March 1978, enacted to deal with problem of uncontrolled speculation in urban land, make land easily accessible to every Nigerian irrespective of gender, and then unify tenure system in the economy. By virtue of this decree, you are expected to own land anywhere in this country, irrespective of your race, irrespective of your religion, irrespective of your ethnicity, or anywhere. And again, the essence of that land use is to ensure equity and justice in land allocation and distribution, among others, prevent fragmentation of rural land arising from the application of the traditional principle of inheritance. What are the property rights to land and land rights in Nigeria? According to food and agricultural organizations, the right that a person has in an object such as land may be considered as one's property. This is what we call usufructory right. What do we mean by this? mean you as a person have the right to use and profit from a property vested in another, a property that is not yours, but you have the right to use it. That person can vest that right on you, so long as the user, that is the person that giving out, does not change the substance of the property. They also have right of occupancy, which is given by the government. You have a certificate of occupancy. After due process, surveys of these ones are carried out and satisfy that you are the real owner, then you can be given. But do you know, every right of occupancy or certificate of occupancies has limited number of years. In that, in fact, a generation is expected to last for 100 years. That after that, the land now is for government. Are you off to receive another COO? But does it happen? I'm not aware if at all it happens. Then you talk of a residual right. This right applies when a land is under pledge. The individual to whom the land is placed continue to use the land perpetually until the land is what is redeemed. That is residual. You now that collected that right under this, collected the land under this right now has what residual right. You know, the land now is under pledge. I can place my land to Mr. A, and then Mr. A continue to use that land until I be able to redeem the land. Then you have another means called symbolic right. Apply where land has been donated for development project without any monetary attachment or mere recognition of the donor. In some places, you have an individual that will donate land for a development project like building of school, building of hospital, and other infrastructure like this, you know, for the purpose then of a development. And that person will, you know, have a recognition as a donor. You also have a grazing right. It's a form of right granted to people to graze on another person's land. Today, we don't talk of open grazing in some states again because of the challenges associated with them. It's expected that we have ranches where animals can graze. Communal right. Communal right is a right of commons where each member of a community has a right to use the holdings of the community independently. So it's another means of the property right. Then you have freehold and leasehold right. By and large, land rights classified as customary right and statutory right. You know, these are right of occupancy or statutory right defined by clearly stated laws and regulations. You know, of this right, symbolic, grazing right, usufructory, communal right, they are derivative of customs and what tradition, depending on what name that suits the, you know, your purpose. Now, property rights to land and light right. These rights are expressed through what? Use. When I have the right to land, what do I have? I have to use the land, I have control over it, and I can transfer in the following ways. Right to use the land, I can give my land to somebody to use. Right to exclude unauthorized people from using the land. Right to control how land will be used. Right to derive income from the land. Right to protection from illegal expropriations of the land. You know, land must be used and must be used in a way and a manner that is okay. You know, you have the right to use the land. In our countries today and in most towns like this, you have the right to build filling stations. But you know that in many residential areas that filling stations are built, it ought not to be so. There should be an industrial area where you site industries, filling stations, and the rest of them, because of the hazards, you know, that comes with them. But today we don't take all these ones into consideration. Access to land in Nigeria. How do we have access to land in Nigeria? Number one is by purchase. In this case, there's this transfer of what? Of title. You have your landed property, which is the land now. You can transfer ownership to me when I buy the land, and it is settled. Then the ownership now is transferred to me. Number two is by lease. Either rent, you know, rents are paid to owner. Normally 1 year. Usually for those that farm, they go and rent land for one cropping season alone. After that, you know, the owner have the land back. We have sharecropping. Now the user cultivates the land, but the produce is shared between the user and owner of land, you know, in an agreed proportion. If I want to farm and I don't have land, and then Mr. B now have land, what happens? I now farm on that land. It gives the right to me now, and then the crops, anything I harvested, is shared in agreed proportion. It might be by inheritance, by heirs of the owner, which is the most common one in our country today, that land is passed on from what generation to generation. Even the generation yet unborn. Also squatting illegally on land. You have, in most cases like this, you have people that occupy the land illegally. They squat on the land. Access to land in Nigeria also may be systematically through land reform policies, advanced possession of prescription by possession of rights through possession for a prescribed period of time. It might be through donations, especially for development projects. Some individuals donate land willfully to the organizations, and also through gift. It might be compulsory acquisition by government. Usually this one happens, compulsory acquisition happens, where the land is in dispute. Two communities can no longer agree, two local governments can no longer agree. Then government has to come in and then declare the place as what as a buffer zone. It might also be traditional means. These are all ways of having access to land. Lands used in Nigeria. What do we use land for in Nigeria and even beyond? It might be agricultural land use. Agricultural land use in Nigeria may take one of the following forms, like gardening, commercial food crop farming, plantation agriculture, either plantations, farm like rubber, cocoa, palm products, forest products, subsistence agriculture, forest clearing, and forest culture. These are all means that the land, can be used in Nigeria. We also have fishing and part-time farming, hunting zones, poultry farming, livestock and pastoral activities, collections and gathering, bush fallow. Land also be used for market. These are infrastructures, hospitals, residential buildings, commercial buildings, worship centers, roads, tugware, borehole, etc. All are the uses of land in Nigeria. Now, the other lesson is resettlement planning and implementation. Resettlement planning and implementation. We're going to see the elements of a resettlement plan, planning for implementation. What are the eligibility criteria for one to be entitled or for one to be assisted in resettlement planning? We look at implementing resettlement plan and then the checklist. What should be done to get ready for resettlement action plan? It's important we know, first of all, the use of land first before we go to resettlement planning. Having already the knowledge of how land can be acquired and the use of land, it is then that you talk of a resettlement plan. Because when you talk of resettlement plan, you are relocating people on the ground of development project to another area. And the area you are relocating them to, the land that belongs to some individual. It might be community. It might be for, a group of people or all that. So it's important to know that this one is acquired. At the end of this, you'll be able to list elements of resettlement plan. You'll be able to explain planning for implementation. You'll be able to identify the criteria for what one will be entitled to in resettlement plan. That is people that are already in an area where resettlement is going to take place, where people are moving to, or development projects, you are relocating them to another area. Let's look at the criteria that you use to settle these people, and then the criteria for assistance, and then how do you restore their livelihood in resettlement. These are the learning outcomes. You're best to do that by way of introduction. Why should we even be concerned about project affected person if physical and economic displacement is unmitigated? We need to be concerned about them, because it gives rise to severe economic, social, and environmental risks if you are not concerned about it and people are displaced. Again, that affected person will face impoverishment if the productive resources or other income sources are lost. Somebody is now relocated to another area where he has no any means of livelihood. So we need to be concerned. And again, affected person may be relocated to an environment where the productive skills, they are less applicable, and the competition for resources is also greater. Imagine somebody now who has been a fisherman all the days of his life and now relocating to another area where there are no rivers for him to fish. So what do you do? Take that into consideration. That is why you need to be concerned about it. In that case, you need to provide fish pond as a means of them sustaining their livelihood. Affected community, institution, and social network may also be weakened. That's why we need to be concerned about them. And also having group may be dispersed. We have because of cultural identity, because of traditional authority, and potential for mutual help may be diminished or even lost. So for this reason, We say that involuntary resettlement should be what? Avoided because of all this. It becomes increasingly important where there is no alternative to it. And then where involuntary resettlement is unavoidable, it should be minimized and appropriate measures to mitigate adverse impacts on displaced person should be carefully planned and implemented, because displacement always comes with consequences, whether we like it or not. When people, you can imagine somebody who has spent all his years' life in a place, and for development projects comes now, you are relocating to another area entirely that you're not even used to. Think of the weather conditions in that area. Think of the community, the people that is going to meet. If they're not friendly, what happens? So you take all these ones into consideration. What are the elements of resettlement plan? We have to describe the project, general description of the project, identify the project area, what are the potential impact. The potential impact here might be, positive or negative, but overall, the interest is that we have positive impact of the project. What are the objectives? The main objective of the resettlement program. Then you carry out the census survey and baseline socioeconomic study. Census survey is important, to know who will be affected, to know the economies that are there, to know the houses that are there, to know the business that are there, and all this. This one is important because of what? Compensation. We also talk of legal framework, institutional framework, eligibility, definition of displaced persons, and criteria for determining their eligibility because of what? Compensation. Also, loan and assistance, including relevant cut-off dates. Cut-off dates now, if a development project is coming and then a census has been taken, people now that are in that area now, their population, their census, everything they have, assets now have been taken, and then the number. And then they're giving enough time that, let's say 3 months time now, every data concerning these people will be taken, so we set off the cut-off date. After that, any other person that comes after the cut-off date, the person will not be, given anything because he was not captured originally from the beginning. And that is why ample time is given. What are the other elements of resettlement plan? We have valuation and compensation for losses, community participation, implementation schedule, cost and budget, grievance redress mechanism, monetary evaluation, then arrangements for adaptive work management. Very, very important. Now, if you want to summarize the resettlement context, the resettlement plan provides an illustrative basis for future action. It establishes entitlement or compensation and other forms of assistance. Entitlement, who is entitled to what? Program actions regarding livelihood development or population relocation as relevant. It also establishes the role and responsibility, clear designation of authority and clear coordination arrangement among all agencies or jurisdictions involved in implementation. Then there should be budget, there should be arrangements for meeting financial contingencies and the rest. It also has to do implementation timetable, including sequencing requirement. There should be a timetable for programs. At this phase, this is where we want to be. At this level, this is what we want to be. When this one is set from the beginning, you know if things are not moving according to plans, then you know where there's a problem. There should be summary of consultation with affected persons and future community engagement provisions, including grievance redress arrangement. In every resettlement program, certainly some people will be aggrieved for one thing or the other. And that is why grievance redress mechanism must be in place, to handle issues that may crop up like that. Then you have monitoring and evaluation provisions and arrangement for adaptive management. Now, what do we define eligibility criteria? Who is entitled to what? Number one, people that are entitled are project affected persons. We call them PAPs, or project affected household, or PAP. People directly affected by the project through the loss of land, either residences, other structural business assets, or access to resources. There are people whose agricultural land will be affected either permanently or temporarily because of the project. Persons whose residential house will be affected either permanently or temporarily by the project. Just look at this picture. Just look at this image. These are project affected persons or household who are entitled to compensation under the resettlement planning. No matter the residence, no matter how tattered they are, provided that is where they live, before the project takes off, they must be compensated, even if they are living in batches or tax houses or wherever that they are. They have to be compensated. Person whose leased houses will be affected permanently or temporarily by the project, or whose business, occupation, or places of work will be affected. Persons whose other assets or access to those assets will be affected in part or in total by the project, provided they are affected in one way or the other. And then we have people whose livelihood will be impacted permanently or temporarily due to restriction of access to protected areas. You know, normally when an area is assigned for a project, you see signpost, this place assigned for this, keep up, you know, and therefore you don't have access to it again. So temporarily or permanently, you are restricted. So you are entitled to this compensation. Then we have vulnerable groups, the poor, the poorest household, as identified by the survey result. Poor landholders that have limited productive land, determined by the minimum amount of farmland needed to be a viable farmer in the project area. Household and individuals who have the stability income condition affected severely because of the project, they are also entitled and a part of compensations. These are the criteria. Yes, no matter the person, whether the person has not or not, provided his or her property is affected, it must be considered. Look at this. Look at this picture. These are vulnerable groups that have suffered displacement on the ground of whatever things. This one might be a sort of floor or anything, but you see, you look at the condition of pitiable. Even humanly speaking, when you see somebody like this, you'll be pushed, you'll be moved to help. That is the spirit. That is what we are talking about. Defining eligibility criteria occurs on the basis of gender. Through consideration of gender issues should be paid more attention during the project implementation process. Like I said on the other presentation, yesterday, that women, children, and the old, they are normally stamped as a vulnerable group. And also, if you look at it, because in every displacement and every crisis, they are the worst hit. So they must be considered. Then you talk of income restoration program, resettlement site preparation, and any other opportunity of public hearing. Women's voices should be carefully listened to know their rights and voices. That is why in every arrangement like this, there must be representative of women, representative of youth, representative of whoever group that we know whose influence will also have the negative impact on the project. You have representative of women union invited to participate in public hearing. It's important. Defining eligibility. Then, who are those to be assisted? Project sponsor must establish and disclose the criteria by which affected people will be considered eligible for compensation and other resettlement assistance. The procedure should include provisions for consultation with affected person, whether household, community leader, authority, and as appropriate. In every area, we have group. You have individuals and the stakeholders in the community that know any other person more than you, than outside of the project donor. Displaced persons in the following two groups are entitled to compensation for loss of land or other asset, whether dwelling or crops taken for project purpose, and for resettlement assistance. What like that? Gender, we have talked about it, income restoration. So those who have formal legal rights to land or other affected assets, includes customary and traditional right to the use of land or other assets. Those who do not have, I may not have legal rights to land at the time of the census, but I'm already occupying the land. Formal legal rights here means by, the government me having certificate of occupancy or right of occupancies, but I have claim to such legal right by virtue of occupation or use of those assets. I'm entitled to compensation. The access of legal title to land or other asset is not in itself a part of compensation for lost asset or to other resettlement assistance. We know the situation in this country that if you want to get your CFO, you make repeated visits, day in, day out, months, years, to land and survey for you to be able to have it. And then in that process, maybe the land now is taken over by the government on the ground of the development project. So you are entitled, provided you have something, a claim to that land, you'll be compensated fully. Then these people are entitled to assistance. You have seasonal resources users like the herders, like fishing family, hunters, gatherers may have, independent economic relation with community located within the project area that will be adversely affected by resettlement. They don't own the land, but because of the activities, like hey, let's move from one place to another, and that land will be overtaken. Because of the development project, so they're entitled to this. The existence of source population and economic relation can be determined through direct consultation and through socioeconomic survey. So we need to know them. Then we talk of a squatter. They are not entitled to compensation for loss of land if you are occupying land. Now, let me tell you something. This is university, and then by the roadside you have people that have kiosks. They build one or something like this, and then they are making their living. And the land is going to be taken over by the government. They are entitled to what assistance. They are not entitled to compensation per se because they are not the original owner of the land, but they are living there. So this project must have a human face, for them to be assisted with something. I said they are entitled to compensation for any improvements made to the land, like structures that they built, like perennial crops they planted and trees, as well as resettlement assistance if they occupy the project area before an established cutoff date. Meaning that any person that comes after cutoff date, you will not be given anything because already sanctions have been taken. Now, if adequate public notice of the cutoff date has been given, any person who settled in the project site after that date are not entitled to compensation for lost assets or any other form of resettlement assistance. Get it clear. Already cutoff date has been set. Enough time, wide publicity has been given, and then census have been taken for like 3 or 5 months. And then after all this, now then somebody's coming now to have a structure to build something, on the project site. We are saying that the cutoff date has already elapsed, and therefore the person is not entitled to anything. I'm aware of a story that the construction of the road from one place to another after the cutoff date, the economic trees there, of course, were taken before the cutoff date. After cutoff date and the construction started, there some people went and planted economic trees, and they asked for compensations. In this case, this one will not count. The project was to ensure the eligibility criteria, whether for relocation assistance and cost recovery, they are not disadvantageous to women whose income tend to be lower and less stable than those of men. Every person must be treated equally, fairly, justice, fairness, and equity for all, without discrimination on the basis of gender, on the basis of sex, on the basis of religion, on the basis of political affiliation. Eligibility for relocation and the location of new site should be made to the head of the household, male or female. In this sense, let me emphasize something here, because in our culture, women are often recognized as a second-hand citizen also. If it is a woman that is the head of the household and the project is going to affect the household, so the compensation should be to that woman and not the male in that company. That is it. Whether land title, use right agreement should, if possible, be registered in the name of husband and wife or in the name of the woman if she is the head of the household. That's what should be. Now look at this picture. This is pictures of the women that are queuing up to get assistance after displacement. The displacement here may be because of conflict, maybe because of crisis, because of flood, because of anything. Look at this. The line is so huge, and some of them start even looking whether the teams will be able to get to them. Most of them are women, of course, like I said, Maria, but mostly they're women, because in every displacement they are the worst case. Now, livelihood restoration in a resettlement. Inform affected people of their options and right concern resettlement. Then we have to provide technically and economically feasible options for resettlement based on consultation with affected people and assessment of resettlement alternative. Whether it is physical relocation is required or not, provide affected people are to be provided with prompt and effective compensation at full replacement value for loss of asset due to project activities. It is better to overcompensate or the same amount instead of undercompensate people that are affected. Where physical relocation is necessary, provide assistance and relocation expenses, that is moving allowances, whether it's by transportation, special assistance, and health care for vulnerable group. Relocation schedule and assistance. Resettlement action plan should outline the details of the physical movement of people scheduled for relocation to the resettlement site. There must be a schedule. That's why from the beginning I talked of timetable, so that you see whether things are moving according to plan. You need to say that one from the beginning. The outline should include dates and times of movement, how information on the relocation will be disseminated to the affected people, whether logistics, transportation of people and belongings to the site. All these will help be taken into consideration. Then you make arrangements for temporary shelter and service in a new place. You should provide food, provide water, emergency medical care, waste management, route on arrival at the site. Any moving allowance to be paid in lieu of relocation assistance must be documented and justified why it has to be so. The reason for documentation is for evidence, is for proof that this actually happened and that somebody is a witness, and that person has to sign. Now, you make provision for members of vulnerable groups, like pregnant women, like the aged, like the handicapped, who will request special assistance with physical relocation. Special provision has to be made for them as assistance. Now, livelihood restoration. In cases where resettlement affects the income earning capacity of the displaced family, compensation alone will not guarantee the restoration and improvement of their lively or their living standard. Therefore, what do you do? Project sponsors, you have to undertake resettlement as sustainable development initiative, an initiative to lead to an improved standard of living for project affected people. There should be a way for their livelihood to be restored, for them to start life again. You can imagine somebody moving from one area to another where he has a lot of customers in the business he was doing before, and the new area that is going, it will take him time before he know one or two persons, and the business will flow. Some of the customers may not even be willing to follow him to the new location, depending on the distance. And that is why livelihood restoration, what do we do to mitigate, all this impact of the losses going to suffer before the man finally settle down? Now, implementing resettlement plan. Resettlement outcome depend on the quality of implementation. Very, very important. Because if it is not done properly, the consequences are there. And that is why from the beginning, it has to be done in a way and a manner so that you deliver on the promise. Even the best plan, whether prepared with tremendous attention to detail, do not by themselves improve the lives of affected persons unless resettlement programs are also diligently implemented. When you set out a timetable and everything to be done, make sure that it is followed and everything is done in a way. The final checklist, for things to be done before resettlement action plan, before it is implemented. You have to relate the resettlement implementation schedule to adequate staffing levels at various stages, including ensuring implementing agency, unit adequately staffed and equipped before implementation begins, implementation coordination mechanisms activated, ongoing consultation with affected persons, updating census and socioeconomic survey if necessary. This has to be done. There is a discussion question here that we will have to provide answers for in the discussion forum, that to differentiate between entitlement and assistance. Who has the right to be entitled to something in displacement, and then who has the right to be assisted in a displacement when it comes to resettlement? Now, we've talked about the land, the means of acquiring land. We have to hammer on that one first, because we have to know the means of acquiring land before we talk of resettlement. And so, having known how lands can be acquired, either from individual, from government, from community, then you know how people will be resettled and what you should follow. I hope anywhere you find yourself, think of it. Of course, voluntary resettlement is not the best option for anything. But if at all it must be done, all this that have been enumerated must be taken into consideration. Thank you so very much. Thanks for your apt attention. Thank you and thank you. I pray now that you've learned something, and it's important you practice this, all that we said from the beginning. land tenure, resettlement planning, and implementations. Anywhere you find yourself, being an agent of this, and keep the flag flying. Thank you so very much.